Today I have the pleasure of showing you the new Revolver 380 V2. I did a new motor design. It's probably been 6 months or a year ago or more. Actually, this one was a few years ago, to tell you the truth. And it was an odd size, I felt, that I just never really got around to producing. And this is the 380 V2 we're calling. As you can see, compared to the normal 540 size Revolver or the snub nose or the new classic that we have released, it is a smaller diameter. The outside diameter at the widest portion is only 29 millimeters as compared to a normal 540, which is in between 35 and 36 millimeters. But what I did was essentially work backwards from what I know is a powerful enough motor, and I got essentially the length of it within the case constraints. Now, why did I actually engineer this motor? And for the majority purpose, this is actually for the CR12 style platform. I'll pull one out for you here real quick. This is the little 12th scale that Associated and many other companies have available. You can actually see this prototype motor. It is the exact same layout. I changed the face, the mounting plate of it just a little bit. But this is one of the prototypes. This one was a little bit shorter. As you can see, we ended up going with the longer version because it produced quite a bit more torque. And yeah, it just bolts right in the CR12. The only difference is that you will need a pinion with a 1/8 inch bore on there. But what I did on this particular version is I made the mounting patterns very universal. So if we take a look here, we have 6 different mounting positions, or I guess 3 different mounting positions with a 540 standard. We also have the mounting positions for 16 and 14 millimeters with a 2.5 millimeter screw. And that covers the CR12, and then the 540 mounts cover basically everything else. Now, power-wise, where does this fit in with a lineup? We're gonna have to talk about flux gap area to really tell you what this is about. So the flux gap area is essentially the area around your motor in between the rotor and the stator. The FGA is calculated by the circumference of your stator or rotor, depending on how you're doing it. With an outrunner, I use the stator diameter, and then we multiply that circumference by the length. So it becomes an area of this cylinder of work, essentially. It's a really good way to compare different style motors and to figure out, well, why does one motor perform one way and one motor perform another? So let's just go through and tell you how the FGA compares to these other motors. So the snub nose Revolver, it has a flux gap area, an FGA of 879 millimeters squared. I'm gonna drop the millimeter squared for the rest of these. The 540 Revolver, which has twice the length of stators, twice that number. So we go from 879 to 1758 millimeters squared. Now, the V2 380, it has an FGA of 1450 millimeters squared. The reason why I made it more powerful in terms of FGA as compared to the snub nose, pretty much right in between the snub nose and the full size, is that when you have a smaller diameter of motor, it can't produce as much torque. So to beef this up, so to speak, I went with a longer rotor. And as we've discussed before, your materials increase is the square of the diameter, but your materials increase is only a linear function to the length of a motor. So if you have a motor that is twice as long, then it'll produce twice the torque and twice the power, more or less, before we include a lot of other factors in there, but more or less twice the factor. But when you go twice on the diameter, you actually have a squared effect on your power. And if you think about this as far as materials on the inside of your motor, when you double your diameter or double your radius, you actually have that squared effect because we're calculating the area inside the circle. And this would be magnets, this would be copper wire. This is where all the stuff fits that is the, the good stuff. So the reason why this smaller motor that has a higher FGA may not quite produce the same amount of torque and power, it actually won't, as the snub nose Revolver, it's because of that smaller diameter. But smaller diameter can come in handy. If you are looking for something that would be going into a scale rig and you don't just need something that's really short, but you also need something that is small diameter, this would be the Revolver to choose. If you have a competition rig to where you want to get your motor as low as possible, the smaller diameter of this 380 V2 will let you do that. Another reason to use this is the cost effectiveness and of course the compatibility with many different mounting patterns. So as far as a crawler is concerned, you really can put this in just about anything that's not a 2-speed rig. I haven't tested it in the TRX4. It would work fine in the Sport, assuming that it's geared properly. But this is really more for those, slow speed rigs. We only have the 2000 kV, which is a good fast enough but not too fast version of kV. And this will be something that I install into my CR12 because the stock motor on them is kind of lackluster, let's just call it. So I hope that does explain to you the 380 V2 Revolver, why I designed it, and how it's going to stack up as far as the other ones. And let's just go ahead and talk about the weight as well. So our regular Revolver comes in at about 89 grams for our normal snub nose version. And even though this is a slightly weaker motor, and we can tell that because the resistance, the terminal resistance of it is a little bit higher than our Revolver is for an equal kV. This one weighs 91 grams. So due to the smaller diameter, we don't quite get as much oomph and it ends up weighing a couple grams more. But again, if the aspect ratio is a big deal for you, that's why you would choose a smaller diameter motor as opposed to a larger diameter motor. So there we go. It's world's difference as far as the Revolver Classic, just to give you an idea. It's 1450 FGA on the small guy on the 380 V2, and the Classic is a whopping 2285. And of course, there's a lot more motor heft to that. All right, so if you do have any more questions about it, maybe some installation questions or any other questions about the design of it, be sure that you put it down below. And of course, this guy is going to be, smooth starting magnetics as always. It's totally my design on there, and so I'm quite proud of it and quite excited to throw this into some of my rigs and check it out a little bit more as the future rolls on. So I do appreciate you tuning in. Have a good day.